Peyote religion, often called the peyote cult, is a pan-Indian, semi-Christian religious movement whose ritual believers eat the peyote cactus. It's considered pan-Indian because it's got a large number of different Native American groups that are part of the overall movement. Early symbolism was increasingly focused on traditional Native American religious symbols, although many Christian symbols have come into play as the peyote religion grew and spread across North America. In this way, later versions of the ritual can be considered semi-Christian, although the focus remains on Indian belief. It is considered nativistic because of its stressing the maintenance of Indian religion for Indians. Navajo peyotists believe in a similar deity figure to Christians, like an all-powerful, transcendent God who is considered to be the same being worshipped by everybody everywhere. This ideology is in line with the majority of peyotists in other cultures. Peyote is the symbol of the church and is the sacrament, similar to crackers and wine in Catholic Mass. The imbibing of peyote in the ritual is a means of communication with the deity figure, and it can be used as a cure for spiritual and physical disease. The peyote plant, Lophophora williamsi, is a spineless cactus that grows between northern Mexico and southern Texas. The plant is a light shade of green, segmented in small buttons that grow between 1 and 2 inches, and it grows in clusters close to the ground along taproot. The buttons are part of the cacti and are eaten as sacrament and are commonly dried before consumption. They taste really bitter, and they commonly induce vomiting. The effects of the buttons include euphoria, an agreeable point of view, relaxation, colorful visual distortion, and a sense of timelessness. The beginnings of peyoteism as a widespread cult in the United States starts somewhere around 1885 with a number of Oklahoman Kiowa and Apache tribes, notably the Lipan and the Mescalero. It is most probable that the origin of the unique peyote ceremony in the United States began with the Mescalero Apache, although this is mostly speculation as records for the time are sparse and sometimes unreliable. Notwithstanding present enthusiasm, the practice of the peyote religion was late in coming to the Navajo, or at least in being officially acknowledged by the Navajo. The introduction of the ritualistic use of peyote was not a smooth transition for them. It is necessary to bear in mind the size of the reservation, the great distance between villages, the nomadic nature of the culture, the isolation of many families. These phenomena made it possible for considerable inroads to be made by peyoteism among the Navajo, without centers of population becoming aware of it. These phenomena made it possible for peyoteism to continue and flourish even after state and tribal law began to prohibit its usage. Peyoteism began on the Navajo reservation in the years just before 1920, and continued unmolested for around 20 years until the issue became an important debate within the Navajo. The Navajo refer to peyote as azi, which means medicine. The difference between this type of medicine and the traditional idea of Western medicine is that the Navajo term refers to more than what we would consider medicinal. Peyote as a medicine refers to its supernatural power that is derived from the ritual itself. Peyote, as both the ritual and the substance, is considered a spiritual gift from God. There are a number of reasons to hold a peyote meeting, such as curing, blessing children, asking for economic help or success in livelihood, for the celebration of a holiday, solemnizing a marriage, or memorializing the dead. The meeting is commonly held for certain patients who may or may not be truly ill. Nonetheless, the ceremony is conducted on behalf of the patient with sponsors who are commonly the patient themselves or a close relative of said patient. In the beginning, peyoteism saw a good bit of opposition, particularly from the Christians and certain members of the Navajo Tribal Council. The biggest reason for the initial opposition stemmed from the fact that peyoteism was not Christian, was not the traditional Navajo religion, and the drug itself was purported to have a wide range of dangerous effects, ranging from insanity to stillbirths. In 1938, 2 roadmen, or shamans, were arrested for possession of peyote, even though there was no tribal statute on the subject. In 1940, the Tribal Council outright banned the sale, use, or possession of peyote in Navajo country. The reasoning behind this decision stemmed from the fact that peyote was unconnected to traditional Navajo religious belief, and it was considered damaging to traditional Navajo life. It is somewhat ironic that this decision was made for these reasons, as it was spearheaded by councilmen who were Navajo Christians, and in some cases non-Navajo missionaries, neither of which held traditional Navajo religious belief. Only one council member at this time voted against the ban of peyote. The passing of this law caused problems for the Commissioner of Indian Affairs at the time, John Collier. Legally, the tribe retained sovereign powers and permitted the limitation of some religious freedom. Collier ended up accepting the resolution despite holding a high opinion of the peyote religion. Collier would later ask that the police take minimum initiative to enforce this by acting only on complaints. Despite this, arrests began in 1941. In an interesting turn of events, it was ruled in April 1944 that no federal employee, which included tribal police, could be used to enforce the statute, since federal funds could not be used to violate the federal constitution. This interesting loophole allowed the tribal council to uphold their statute, but prohibited them from enforcing it. Despite this, arrests continued to occur, with somewhat haphazardous outcomes, trials with fines in jail or probation, release without trial, any of the above. The council felt that its authority was mocked. Peyotists who were being arrested felt that their freedom of worship was being threatened. In 1945 and 1946, following a common practice of peyotists in other states since the 1920s, they responded by filing papers of incorporation in Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, as had been done in other states. Frank Takes Gun, the then vice president of the Native American Church, was the man who started this movement. Peyote was illegal in most states, except for Utah. But nonetheless, the Articles of Incorporation mentioned the use of peyote as a sacrament, and this was used as a charter to dispute arrests. A movement beyond the tribal council began around 1947 with vigilante raids against peyoteists, and the publication of articles hostile to peyoteism began to appear in newspapers and magazines, largely through the efforts of a medical missionary, Dr. Clarence G. Salisbury, the then head of the Presbyterian mission at Ganado. Counterstatements were also published, one signed by several anthropologists and one signed by Collier himself, no longer Commissioner of Indian Affairs. The tribe began to use its own funds to pay tribal police, starting partially in 1953. Now that the police were not federal employees, the inability to punish the statute was voided. Despite this, arrest records do not show an increase in arrests, as the federal ruling had largely been ignored. In 1954, arrests of 13 peyoteists arrested during a single meeting resulted in the Navajo peyoteist requesting a hearing before the tribal council. The council's mind was not changed, and the peyotists decided to nullify the resolution through the federal court action. Under the leadership of Frank Takes Gun, the newly elected president of the Native American Church of North America, there were two efforts in 1956, one in 1958, and one in 1960. The 1958 case was reviewed by the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. The 1960 case was initiated in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. It was reviewed by the District of Columbia Court of Appeals in 1962 and was rejected for appeal by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1963. Thus, the Native American Church failed in all its attempts to nullify the Navajo Tribal Anti-Peyote Ordinance of 1940 through federal court action. In 1956, the tribal count furthered its opposition to peyote, legalizing the destruction of peyote that was confiscated during arrests. Even so, the number of peyote councilmen began to grow, from one member in 1940 to almost a dozen in 1959. In 1963, Native American church members threw their support to Raymond Nakai. Nakai was a non-peyotist whose speeches stressed religious liberty for Navajos, and thus by implication the peyotists. After his election, there were no more arrests of peyotists, although he took no further steps until the beginning of his second term. In 1967, the tribal court passed the resolution CO 6367, which included, among other things, a freedom of religion as a basic human right. Days later, a controversial resolution, CO 6567, was passed by a vote of 29 to 26. This new resolution continued the prohibitions present on peyote, but included the exemption. It shall not be unlawful for any member of the Native American Church to transport peyote into Navajo country, or to buy, sell, possess, or use peyote in any form in connection with the religious practices, sacraments, or services of the Native American Church. This effectively allowed the peyotists to possess and use peyote in conjunction with religious practice, but continued to prevent the peyote trafficking and casual non-religious use. For the first time in 27 years, peyotists were free to practice their religion in the open. From a handful of participants in the 1930s, the peyote religion in the Navajo country grew to embrace at least a substantial minority and perhaps a majority of the tribe by 1974. This growth was stimulated by the fact that Navajos faced new problems growing out of their relationship with larger society. Opposition to peyoteism was stronger, more organized, and more prolonged than in any case of any other tribe to which there is a detailed history. But the peyotist struggle of more than 30 years was successful. Their success is attributed to their determination, courage, and organizational abilities, yet when one considers other valiant struggles for Indian rights, water, tribal control of tribal destiny, and justice for Indians, the question arises why there is success in the peyote arena and failure in so many others. Granting the vigor of peyoteists and their willingness to face arrest and jail, one might nevertheless suspect the struggle over peyoteism threatened white values but not white interests, while in other conflicts, interests of powerful white groups are engaged in opposition to Indians. The Native American Church has proved itself strong in the face of threats. Its beautiful ritual, its moral code, and its efforts to maintain community against all corrosive atomization of Indian groups, its significance as a vehicle for Indian identity, and its ways of reacting to Indian deprivation are likely to make it appeal to Navajo people and give meaning to the lives of tens of thousands of Navajos for many years to come.